Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're talking about sex. So much of what we think we know about it actually comes from myths, and that can lead to a lot of pressure and anxiety. So we're here to separate those myths from reality and uncover the simple truths.
And where does a lot of that confusion come from? Well, a huge source is pornography. And that brings up a really big question a lot of us have. Okay, so let's really get into this because honestly, these myths create so much unrealistic pressure. Let's start by looking at the biggest differences between what's shown on a screen and what actually happens in real life.
So, first things first, we have to understand that what we see in porn, it's not just a slightly exaggerated version of real life. A lot of the time, it's a complete fantasy. It's basically scripted entertainment, right? Not a how-to guide.
So just take a look at this comparison. On one side, you've got porn, which is, at its core, a performance for an audience. It's edited, it's enhanced, it features bodies that aren't always realistic, and it often, completely ignores female pleasure. But then you have real intimacy. That's all about connection, it's spontaneous, it's authentic, and the whole point is mutual pleasure between two people with natural bodies. And get this, a 10-minute scene you see on screen, that can take 3 or 4 hours to film. What you're seeing is literally just a tiny slice of a very long, very staged process. It's not some spontaneous, passionate moment. It's a job, and it should absolutely never be the blueprint for your own intimate life. And all of this stuff we see in porn, it feeds into one of the biggest, most damaging myths out there. It's one that causes a ton of anxiety for so many people. Yeah, this idea that bigger is better, it creates so much pressure. But here's the thing, it's a belief that's almost entirely based on a visual fantasy, not on how pleasure and anatomy actually work in the real world.
So, what's the real story? Well, the truth is actually a lot simpler and, honestly, a lot more reassuring. I mean, if you just look at the actual facts, it's pretty straightforward. Biologically, the vagina isn't some endless space, right? When aroused, it's about 10 to 14 centimeters long. So that means that something extremely large can actually cause pain, not more pleasure. The global average, by the way, is somewhere between 4.5 and 6 inches. So what really creates pleasure isn't a specific size, it's compatibility. It's about how two partners' bodies fit together. It's technique. Okay, so if size isn't the be-all and end-all, then what is? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is something that often gets rushed or even skipped altogether: foreplay. And I love this quote. "Your skin is your biggest erogenous zone." It's such a simple but powerful thing to remember. Pleasure isn't just about 1 or 2 specific spots. Our entire body is covered in skin, our biggest erogenous zone, which makes foreplay a true full-body experience.
Yeah, we really need to stop thinking of foreplay as just a warm-up. A lot of the time, it is the main event. For a woman's body, it can take 30 minutes, maybe even more, to get fully aroused and naturally lubricated. So when you rush that beautiful, slow buildup, that can lead to pain. Taking your time, exploring, that's what builds real, genuine intimacy. And that brings us to another really important part of all this: learning to listen to your body's signals, especially when it comes to pleasure and pain. Okay, this is probably one of the most important things to take away from this entire conversation. Sex should not hurt. If you feel pain, that's your body telling you that something isn't right. So what do? You stop. Immediately. You talk to your partner about what you're feeling. Maybe you try a water-based lubricant. But the key thing to remember is you should never, ever feel like you have to just grit your teeth and bear it. Okay, so now let's switch gears and talk about pleasure. What's this number 40 all about? Well, it comes from a study showing the potential number of orgasms a woman can have in a single session. Now look, that's not a typical experience, and it's definitely not a goal you need to shoot for, but it's a powerful way to show the immense capacity for pleasure that often gets really underestimated. And this huge capacity for pleasure makes total sense when you remember that orgasms don't just come from penetration. We've already talked about this, right? The whole body is an erogenous zone. Pleasure can be found and explored through all kinds of different touch and stimulation. So when you pull all of these pieces together, getting past the myths, understanding our bodies, making pleasure a priority, it all boils down to one single thing: the most important ingredient for great sex. And this right here, this is the big mindset shift. It's about getting away from this idea that sex is some kind of exam you have to pass, where you're worried about performing and scared of failing. Instead, what if we see it as a journey of exploration with a partner, one where the real goal is shared pleasure and connection. So how do you go on that journey? Simple. Communication. That's what builds true intimacy. It's talking, it's laughing, it's being open and honest with each other, way before you even get to the bedroom. You got to remember, sex is a connection between two minds first, and that's what allows for a deeper connection between two bodies.
So we'll leave you with this one question to think about. What would change, really change, if the goal was never about performance, but always about connection? Because when we focus on that, on genuine communication and mutual pleasure, that's when we can finally let go of all those myths and discover what a truly satisfying and healthy sex life is really all about.